I've got to hold my hands up here. In one of my most recent videos, I had said something at the time I really believed. I said if Britain went to war, we'd see a massive surge in people joining up to fight. That the call to arms, the sense of duty would kick in just like it did in 1914 and 1939. But after digging deeper, reading all of your comments and actually listening to what the people are saying out on the streets, I've realised something. I was wrong. The truth is, people don't see war in the same way. They're not rushing to sign up. They're not saying, send me abroad, I will fight for king and country. What they are saying though is this: I'll fight if Britain is attacked. I'll fight if our homes, our families, our land is under threat. But I will not fight in somebody else's war. Not for politicians, not for king, and not for oil. And not for agendas that don't affect me. And that changes everything. Now, let's go back for a second. For most of Britain's history, war and service have been tied to one thing: duty. Whether it was serving the king, the empire, or the nation. Men marched off believing they were protecting something bigger than themselves. In 1914, when the First World War broke out, nearly 1 million men volunteered within the first few months. They thought it would be over by Christmas. They thought they were defending civilization. In 1939, the same thing again. The threat of Nazi Germany was clear, and millions of people stepped up. Without hesitation, Britain faced annihilation, and people believed it was their personal responsibility to push back. Even as recently as the Falklands in 1982, the country rallied behind the armed forces. A small, distant set of islands, but the principle was clear: British people, British land, British sovereignty. So in my head, when I first talked about war today, I assumed we would see the same surge of volunteers, that same spirit of duty. But that's where I was completely wrong. The modern reality is Britain today is different. People are not thinking in the same way as our grandparents, our great-grandparents. And why? There's a few reasons. First, there's the distrust in leadership. People look at politicians and they don't feel represented. They see lies, broken promises, corruption, and say, why would I risk my life for them? Second, there's a distance from war. Since the days of Iraq and Afghanistan, the reality has really sunk in. Wars abroad often feel pointless, messy, and unwinnable. Thousands of British soldiers gave everything in those conflicts. But what was achieved? Afghanistan fell back to the Taliban hands within weeks of our withdrawal. People look at the end and say, what was the point? Third, there's the shift in identity. People don't feel the same blind loyalty to the monarchy or to the system. Their loyalty is to their families, to their mates, to their communities. But to our king, our prime minister, not so much. So when you ask that question, would you join up if Britain went to war? The answer you hear more often than not is depends on the war. This is the key difference. People aren't saying they're cowards. They're not saying they're going to hide. But what they are saying is they will stand and fight if our land is under threat. If and when Britain is invaded, if foreign troops landed on our shores, you'd see millions of people stand up. People would grab whatever they could. Shotguns, bats, even kitchen knives. And you'd see communities pull together like never before. But if it's about sending troops to Ukraine or the Middle East or some far off conflict where Britain isn't directly under threat, the answer from most people, the majority of people, is a hard no. And I think that's a really important shift. Because what this means is Britain's will to fight has become defensive, not offensive. It's about protection, not projection. And that is exactly why we created our Combat Ready coffee. It's about fueling yourself for battles that actually matter. Whether that's a workout, a long shift, or just pushing through another tough day. We are not here to give you a cheap energy spike. We're here to keep you sharp, focused, and ready for whatever comes. So if you want to stay prepared, you want to stay focused, grab yourself a bag of Combat Ready coffee. Links in the description. Now let's get back into it. Now, let's break down why so many people have said they will not fight another person's war. 1. The Iraq and Afghanistan legacy. People saw young soldiers come back broken, traumatised, and in coffins. They saw governments spin stories about weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. Trust evaporated. 2. Globalisation and disconnection. People don't feel the same attachment to the empire or influence anymore. The days of Rule Britannia are long gone. People just don't care if Britain's power stretches abroad. They just want their own community safe, free, our economical struggles. Right now, there's so many families that can barely pay their bills. Asking for their money to go abroad or their sons and daughters for a foreign war while politicians sit in luxury feels insulting. 4. Different values. People today value freedom of choice more than blind obedience. They choose to fight if it directly protects them, but they won't be ordered into battles that don't make sense. So really, it's not that Britain has lost its fighting spirit. It's just that Britain has become sceptical of what we are fighting for. Here's where it gets even more interesting. When you talk to ordinary people, they say things like, I won't fight for politicians. I won't fight for King. I won't fight for NATO or EU. But I will fight for my family. I will fight for my street. I will fight if invaders land on our shores. And that tells us something very powerful. The British spirit is alive, very, very much alive, but no longer tied to politicians or the monarchy. It's tied to survival, to the community, to defending home soil. That's a massive change from the past. And it means the way wars are fought and the way governments try to recruit them would look totally different now. If Britain announced tomorrow that we're deploying 50,000 troops to fight in a foreign conflict, let's be honest, the recruitment offices wouldn't be flooded. People wouldn't rush to sign up. But if Britain was attacked, we faced direct invasion, you'd see a tidal wave of volunteers. You'd see communities form militias, veterans dust off their kit, ordinary people stepping forward in numbers that the government couldn't even process. It wouldn't be about loyalty to Westminster, it would be loyalty to Britain. It's about survival. And I think it's a truth that a lot of politicians don't want to face. Now, history has a funny way of repeating. In the Second World War, Churchill understood something very simple. The people would fight if survival was on the line. He didn't say, fight for me. He said, we shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. He tied it to survival, to home, to community. Today, that's exactly where people stand again. They fight when it's personal, when their way of life is at risk. So I was wrong. I thought war itself would trigger a sense of duty. That just the act of Britain entering another conflict would see young men and young women signing up in droves. But that's not how it works anymore. People don't fight because politicians tell them to. They fight when their homes are under threat. Their communities are no longer safe. And maybe in a way that's healthier, because that means people are thinking for themselves. They're not being blindly led into wars that don't serve them. They're reserving their strength for the battle that truly matters. So let's put it to you. If Britain went to war tomorrow, would you sign up? Would you fight abroad for king and country? Or would you wait, hold the line, and only step up if this land, our land, was under attack? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, because this debate is only just the beginning. And remember, stay combat ready. Do this, stay sharp and focused with our combat ready coffee. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.